Few cameras can claim to have the impact of the DJI Pocket 3. This was a compact, affordable vlogging camera which proved to just be incredibly popular. It was so popular, in fact, that now Insta360, DJI's biggest rival, wants to compete in the exact same market. So what I have in my hand right now is the new Insta360 Luna Ultra. This new small gimbal camera features two separate camera systems, some really interesting innovations, and some alleged intellectual property theft. But is it the gimbal camera to buy? Well, I'm Jordan Drake, this is PetaPixel. Wait, holy hell, this screen just comes right off. So if you're a video creator, chances are you're just getting bombarded with all kinds of ads for services featuring just a bunch of really gross AI slop. That stuff sucks, and that's why I really like audio. They have a huge library of rights-free music made by actual human beings with pulses and souls. Sure, they have some AI-based tools to help you find the perfect song for the video that you're making, but all of the music is created by real people. And if you want lifetime access to this entire, giant, wonderful library of music, well, usually they charge $500 for that, which is honestly pretty reasonable, but I could do way better for you. If you use coupon code PetaPixel199, then you can get lifetime access to this wonderful library of music for only $199. That's a smoking deal you should definitely take advantage of. So thank you so much to Audio for supporting real artists, sponsoring our show, and giving you all access to this great deal. All right, let's talk about this gimbal a little more. Okay, so this camera couldn't have actually come at a better time because I really hate filming myself, but Chris is going to be on the road for a few upcoming episodes, and I really don't have any choice but to shoot my video by myself. So hopefully the Luna Ultra will have a few features that make that whole process a little bit more tolerable. As well, this seems to be the season for compact gimbals because at the same time, DJI is launching their new Pocket 4P, a camera that I have actually used, but I'm under embargo still and can't talk about it. So in the future, you can look forward to a comparison of the Luna Ultra to the Pocket 4P, something I'm sure no other YouTube channels will be doing. But in the meantime, I'm just going to talk today about my impressions using the Luna Ultra. Let's talk about the main camera first. This gets you a 20mm equivalent field of view, and it has a pretty bright f1.8 aperture. So in terms of depth of field, this is going to get you something pretty close to like a 20mm f5 on a full frame camera. So that means, you know, if you look at the background there, it's a little soft, it's a little bit out of focus. But behind that is a Type 1 sensor, and that's capable of recording 8K resolution, which really sets this camera apart. Now, right alongside that is the telephoto camera. This is getting you a 60mm equivalent, but it's not going to let in quite as much light because this has a darker f2 aperture and a smaller Type 1/1.3 sensor. But I am impressed that this sensor is still able to record 8K footage. And I love having the option of a longer focal length with a gimbal. It just gives you a completely different look to the footage and opens up some really cool creative options. The headline feature, and probably the coolest part of the Luna Ultra, is this detachable front plate. It gets you a 2-inch display, some camera controls. There's even a little microphone that's built right onto this. And what I love about that is it lets you just have the camera sitting off remotely, and you can still see your frame, remotely control the camera, and even have wireless audio without having to buy any other accessories. This rules! Now, of course, this is a very small screen, and at just over 500,000 dots, it can be really difficult to confirm that the subject that you want is in focus or double check your camera settings, but at least this display is quite bright. It's 1000 nits, so even on a bright day like today, I can still make out at least my composition. And the transmission range on this is actually pretty good. They rate it at 20 meters, but what's most important to me is if I'm using the 3x lens, I can still get a full body shot like this right now, and I can still check my frame and see I am recording. Oh, I look good. Now, just like what I've seen with the DJI equivalents, you may find using that little 2-inch touchscreen really fiddly when you're trying to set up more advanced manual controls or select a small subject in the frame. So I actually find myself pretty regularly pairing this to the iPhone app, and that gets me a much larger display. It's more responsive, makes it really easy to set up my shots, and it pairs fairly quickly. As well, using the app is the only way to see a histogram, which if you're planning to shoot log is basically essential if you want to expose your shots properly. Like most compact gimbal cameras, this does have an internal, non-user replaceable lithium battery on it. Now, Insta360 says this can record for up to 4 hours, but that's doing 1080p recording. So using it the way I have, where I'm doing some 8K, some slow-mo, and a lot of 4K footage, I'm finding I'm getting around 2 hours, which is still pretty respectable. And if you need more than that, you can always just power it off a USB-C power bank, or Insta360 makes a separate power bank that clips right onto the bottom that I really like using. Also built right in is 47 gigabytes of internal storage, which should get you through most quick shoots. If you do need more record time than that, of course, there is still a micro SD card slot built in. Now, I was expecting pretty good tracking performance because I've already used a lot of Insta360's other 360 action cameras, and they do a great job of keeping the subject in the frame. Here it's also going to be focusing while that's tracking. It does a really nice job. Now, if you're looking to film something besides yourself, there's also an optional POV accessory where you can hang the camera from your neck, and through a little earpiece, it'll tell the camera where to point. This will let you film what you're looking at, but you have to be prepared for the social consequences of wearing something that looks this stupid. All right, next up, let's talk about record mode. So if you're averse to hearing numbers and letters and acronyms, well, sorry, the next little bit here is gonna suck. As I mentioned before, both the cameras are capable of recording up to 8K 30 frames per second, and they can do that using a few different standard 709 profiles, and you can make and share your own. They can also record in Leica's L-Log profile, as well as in Dolby Vision HDR if you want to play them back on a very bright display. Now, 4K recording on this camera can go up to 120 frames per second, which is quite impressive, but just remember, DJI's Pocket 4 does give you the ability to do 240 frames per second at 4K. If you want to go really slow like that, you can do it in the 1080p mode. Here we get 1080 up to 240 frames per second. And as you can see here, the quality is definitely a real drop off from what we're seeing in the standard recording modes. Now, all this footage is recorded using H.265 compression. That means you're going to get nice small file sizes, but it also means if you're using an older computer, this can be really demanding to edit. Okay, let's head indoors quickly to talk about low light performance and overheating on this camera. Okay, so I'm here in my office where it is dark right now, and I really want to test the pure video mode on the Luna. And the pure video mode is just a really weird name for the low light recording on this camera, where it's doing frame blending and all kinds of AI algorithms, but it's doing it on camera to give you better low light performance. Now, the downside to this, it's going to cap you at 60 frames per second in 4K, and you won't be able to record 8K in this mode, but you can see it looks pretty good, and it is dark in here. And I really wanted to do this in controlled low light. So what I actually used is the new Westcott Ice Light 3, which is kind of a famous lightsabery looking light, but I love that I can dim this down to extremely low light levels. I use this when I'm doing controlled tests like I am right now, or when I'm out shooting astrophotography. I really like that feature. And what's wonderful about this light is it's already very soft and diffused, so you can put it quite close to a subject and not get a bunch of harsh, gross shadows on them. But the really nice thing is the latest version is also an RGB light, so you can use it for effect or to blend in with all kinds of different color temperatures. And to facilitate mounting it in all kinds of different places, you don't need to plug this in. You can just charge it up through USB-C and it'll run off of an included battery. I really like the Ice Light 3, and if you want to check one out, you should go take a look at fjwestcott.com or click the link in the description below. It's because of great lights like this that Westcott is PetaPixel's preferred lighting partner. But let's talk about the actual test here. So I bounced this light at 1% off the wall, so it was extremely low light levels, and I wanted to compare it to my phone. So first up, shooting both of these in auto and comparing it to the iPhone 17 Pro's selfie camera, you can see it's awful. It's truly horrendous, and selfie cameras are really bad in low light. But for a tougher test, I wanted to compare it to the iPhone 17 Pro's main camera, which is excellent. And here again, you can see the Luna Ultra in pure video mode just has way more detail. It's a far better looking image. So if you're planning to use this to record things in low light like concerts, well, definitely the Luna Ultra is going to give you a better image than your smartphone. All right, next let's talk about overheating on this camera, something I was really curious about because while I was out shooting with it in the bright sun, this thing got hot. Not just the gimbal itself, but when I detached the front plate with the monitor, it was also very warm to the touch. So I wanted to do a controlled test, brought it in room temperature, and wanted to test some of the more commonly used record modes on this camera, starting with 4K 24p, which I think a lot of people will be using for longer things like live performances. And here, this thing just kicked ass. I mean, it got over 2.5 hours of record time before the battery died. Not the camera actually overheating. There were no overheating warnings in that. It was the more specialized modes where you can run into issues. So shooting 8K 24p, I was able to record for just under 50 minutes before the camera overheated and shut down. So if you need long record times, I would avoid the 8K mode. As well, 4K 120p for extreme slow motion, I was able to record just over 40 minutes in that, which is still a ton of slow-mo, again, before the camera overheated. So for the most part, the thermal performance on the Luna Ultra is excellent, and it's just when recording slow motion or very high resolution, you might run into issues with very long record sessions. All right, back to outdoor Jordan. Okay, so now we're back outside, and this is a great time for me to talk about the sharpness that you get on this camera using some of the various recording modes. What I found very impressive with this is whether we're shooting the slowest 4K 24 all the way up to 4K 120. If we're shooting in the L log, then we're getting a lot of detail, but it's not over sharpened like what we see with a lot of smartphone footage. As well, when we're looking at these frame rates side by side, you can see we're actually recording a similar level of detail even when you go up to 4K 120. Typically, you're going to have a big loss of detail once you go over there, more noise and more aliasing issues. So this is quite impressive. But what if you want even more resolution? Well, this is an 8K camera. That is something that sets it apart. And looking at 4K versus 8K recording, you can see when we really zoom in at 300%, there is a little bit more detail recorded when you're in 8K, but it's nothing compared to what we see with the 8K recording in higher end, larger sensor cameras. So you might be thinking, okay, well, as long as I'm shooting a frame rate that's supported in 8K, I might as well always record in that mode, right? Well, we got to talk about dynamic range. So when you're using this camera in its L-log profile, that's the maximum dynamic range, and Insta360 is saying 14 stops of DR, which is actually really impressive. But here I want you to take a look at a side-by-side. So I've recorded a very high contrast scene in 8K and 4K. And if we look at the deepest shadows, despite these having the same exposure, you can see there is way more noise in the shadows in the 8K recording. So that means you're really only going to want to use 8K if you're shooting a fairly low contrast scene at slower frame rates. Honestly, that's a pretty niche use case, so most of the time I would just stick to 4K recording on this camera. In terms of the overall quality of the footage on this, what I really like is when I'm using this L-log profile, it doesn't exhibit a lot of the over-sharpening or the compression issues that we can see with a lot of smartphones when you're filming. As well, because we have fairly large sensors with bright apertures, you can get a little bit of a shallow depth of field with both of the lenses on this camera, as long as your subject is fairly close to the lens. Now, one thing you may have noticed about the footage on this camera is, whoa, the kind of jerky looking video that we see while I'm walking around with it. And that's because I'm shooting faster than standard shutter speeds, because I didn't have a set of ND filters with this. And interestingly, if you look at the different kit options that Insta360 is offering, none of them seem to include those ND filters as well. And if you're looking for really smooth gimbal footage that's gonna set itself apart from a smartphone in a big way, I think that you're gonna wanna grab those ND filters as soon as they're available. So what are my final thoughts on the Luna Ultra? Well, if you're like me and you occasionally find yourself forced into the hell that is filming yourself, well, this has some really useful innovations on it. I mean, the removable screen by itself, which doesn't just give me a monitor, but full camera control as well as the microphone, is just a really clever solution. I know I can use my smartphone with a lot of these action cameras to do a similar thing. Well, with apps, I'm constantly dealing with connection issues, and honestly, I just hate seeing text messages and phone calls coming through on the monitor that I'm trying to use to record my video. This is a very simple and elegant solution, but if you're looking at this based on specs, especially if you're looking at what DJI is doing, well, then things get a lot more complicated, because I was pretty underwhelmed with the 8K recording. Yes, there is a little bit more detail than what we see in the 4K recording, but the penalty to dynamic range and not being able to use it, a lot of the faster frame rates, just mean it's not going to be that useful for a lot of people. So I really think it's going to come down to how much you're going to utilize that removable display, and if you're already in the Insta360 ecosystem, that's going to determine whether or not this is the right camera for you. But as I said at the start of this video, don't worry, I've got a DJI Pocket 4P, and I will be comparing it to this camera in the very near future, so you're definitely going to want to subscribe to check that out. We'll definitely be talking about this on the PetaPixel podcast, which you can listen to using all your favorite podcasting apps. Or if you want to see our faces while we talk about this, you can watch it right here on this same YouTube channel. And you know what? We got some cool B-roll from all kinds of different cities, and that's thanks to PetaPixel members who help us do a much more expansive and interesting show. And you could become a member for only $3 a month or $30 for the year, but you're not just doing it for us out of the goodness of your heart. Take a look at all these sweet benefits that are only available to members. It's definitely worth checking out, but thank you so much for joining me for my look at the Insta360 Luna Ultra. We'll see you all soon with more on PetaPixel.